Good morning. I'm reading aloud to myself the book The Courage Coach by Ashley Easter. Will you join me? This book has some helpful ideas in it. However, a better way books can no longer promote, I think that's the right word, promote Courage 365 and Ashley Easter because of some strange beliefs they've begun endorsing in the last 5 years. We are on page 13 today. We just discussed the cycle of violence stages, and she's going to talk more about the cycle of violence. The cycle of violence can vary in length. It may extend over many years, just days, or in some cases weeks. It could even happen within a matter of hours. The duration of the honeymoon or calm stages may last much longer than the actual violence stage. Convincing the victim that the abuser truly is getting help, or that the violent times are worth enduring for the reward of the good times. In other cases, the cycle may happen so quickly or erratically that it keeps the victim off balance and unable to anticipate what is going to happen next. Many victims are good-hearted and empathetic individuals. The abuser might exploit this. Within the cycle of violence, they will convince the individual under their power and control that staying in the relationship with them is helping to heal the abuser. Other times, the force of violence is a cause of great fear, and the violent stage may intensify with each successive cycle, further controlling and dominating the victim with fear, guilt, or shame. Okay, we ended with the calm cycle last time we read, but now we're going to go into sexual grooming. This will be helpful for me, since I know so little about it. There's a little number, so I want to see what the footnotes say. Footnote 5. This comes from NAASCA, National Association of Sexual Child Abuse. 6 stages of grooming. Jimmy Hinton calls it testing, so if grooming doesn't seem like an accurate concept, maybe think of these stages as testing to see how compliant the group or individual is. Another system of abuse is called grooming. Grooming is typically used to describe the gradual sexualization of a relationship in order to exploit a victim. This term has often been used to describe the way adult perpetrators will court their child or teen victims, but grooming can be observed within adult relationships as well. Choosing a victim. Stage 1. Predators will start by targeting an individual for the purpose of sexual exploitation. To many, it may seem that the predator's choices are random. But in reality, many predators choose their victims carefully to lessen the likelihood of being caught. Predators look for vulnerable people, such as the hurting, the emotionally neglected, the sexually naive, or an isolated person. It is also easier to choose victims who have little oversight or interaction with their family members and close friends. Building rapport, step 2. Once predators have chosen a victim, they will then work to establish a relationship with a positive rapport. They may attempt to insert themselves into the victim's life as a friend, caretaker, mentor, or teacher. In many cases, they will seek to establish trust not only with the victim, but also with those who might be close to them, such as a parent, other family members, and the victim's friends. Predators are sly and may take this stage carefully, slowly, integrating themselves into the victim's life while simultaneously disarming the victim's support network. Step 3, filling a need. By this point, predators are keenly aware of the victim's personal needs and vulnerabilities. They will take this opportunity to fill the void. The predator may shower a victim with time, attention, and affirmation if he or she is emotionally neglected or has low self-esteem. If the individual or their parents are financially unstable, the predator may bring the victims gifts, pay for events or special classes, clothing items, or other costly experiences. If the victim feels overlooked, the predator may pull strings to land him or her a job, a business deal, or connection opportunities. Predators become increasingly necessary in the victim's life as they fulfill the needs and desires they have perceived in the time leading up. Stage 4, isolation of the individual. Once a predator has built a level of dependence within the victim, they can begin to isolate him or her from prior supportive systems around her. Predators may create seemingly innocent situations where they find themselves alone with a victim. This alone time seems reasonable to the victim given the deepening relationship and enforces further dependence and intimate emotional connections. The victim begins to feel as though this relationship with the predator is a unique and different, special thing from all other relationships. This further disconnects the victim from the rest of the world. Or at least it creates a comfort around frequent times of being alone. Stage 5, sexualizing of the relationship. The next step is adding sexual elements into the relationship. These may be subtle at first. They may occur during isolated periods or even in public. Perpetrators may start with a long gaze into the victim's eyes, a slightly longer hug, an arm left around the shoulder, or a hand laying on the thigh. The victim becomes desensitized to these small physical interactions. When these things are enacted in public, perpetrators further desensitize their victim, because victims often feel others around would say something if the interaction were inappropriate. Slowly, ever so slowly, these subtle public touches turn into isolated situations and steadily become more and more overt. A hug becomes pressing the victim's body into theirs, or resting their hand on a sexualized body part. A hand on the leg may turn into touching intimate parts. Looking long into the victim's eyes might turn into a kiss. Before the victim realizes what is happening, the subtle sexual touches eventually turn into openly sexualized behavior, ultimately then fulfilling whatever sexual desire the predator had finally intended. For young children, this process may take place in the form of a game like tickling, or pretending to be a doctor, swimming in the nude, playing up to the child's natural curiosities about sexuality. And young children are particularly vulnerable because of their nativity and trust of adults in their lives. This makes them easy targets for predators' pleasures. Stage 6 is ensuring the power and control status. Once predators are successfully sexualized in the relationship, they then seek to keep it quiet to continue further exploitation. They might do this by telling the victim their relationship is a special one and that they cannot tell anyone because others would not understand it. They may warn that if someone finds out, the victim will get in big trouble. Or they may warn that the predator, whom the victim has grown to love now, would be punished. Predators may even resort to using threats, saying that they themselves will hurt or kill the victim or another loved one if the victim talks about it. The predator may not even have to say anything because the religious or secular position of power over the victim might speak for itself in the child's life. Grooming is a very deceptive process and displays the forethought and deliberate intent of many predators. Predators are not always rash in their behaviors, and they may take months and even years in grooming a single predator. Now we're going to talk about indoctrination and stages. Let's see what EndNote 6 says. ICSAHome.com. Arousal Capacity Baron, CSJ. Stages of indoctrination. Indoctrination is typically used to maintain power and control over groups of people. It is generally seen in group abuse rather than one-on-one abuse. I see examples of indoctrination in religious environments, cults, family sects, that's SECTS, political movements, and even in governments sometimes. Indoctrination usually takes place in a group who have a centralized ideology or doctrine. Traditionally, these groups have had a centralized leader. But with the expansion of the internet and resulting access of information, I feel it may be more accurate to say these groups, high control groups, are bound by similar doctrines and might be enforced by a variety of leaders. The groups may vary in size, ranging from a few people to many thousands of people. Stage 1, the recruitment stage. The recruitment stage is meant to entice victims to the controlling group for the purpose of indoctrination. Some victims are attracted by promises of happiness, hopes for change, a sense of belonging, higher levels of spiritual enlightenment, personal power, or other rewards. Other times, victims will be confronted with threats of disaster or destruction. That could be physically destruction, spiritually destruction, or political destruction. Within the controlling group, it is presented as the only way of escape or of salvation from harm. Recruitment may occur through literature, personal relationships, bait and switch marketing tactics, or mass media marketing. In extreme occasions, victims will be recruited through physical force or capture. Others may simply be born into a controlling group. Step 2, isolation. In the isolation stage, a high control group will begin the indoctrination by weeding out outside influences, ensuring they alone can shape the victim's reality. They may start the isolation stage by claiming others outside the group are dangerous or worldly. Some groups will present victims with perceived important tasks, such as devoting considerable amounts of time to learning the group's dogma, to saving the world, or in defending the group against outside attacks. These tasks quickly take up all of the victim's opportunity for time with people outside of the inner group circle. In extreme cases, victims may be placed in solitary confinement, entirely cut off from the outside world through forced isolation. Disturbing, isn't it? Stage 3, breaking the will. In a high control group, after victims are successfully isolated, a time of breaking their wills begins. The controlling group seeks to cleanse the victim's mind of independent thought when it breaks a victim's will. They may do this through subtle emotional manipulation, belittling of opposing views, using a reward and withhold system to reinforce ideas and actions they deem appropriate, or by punishing those who offend their own worldview. If the emotional control does not work, the controlling group may enforce other forms of discipline, such as substantial mental abuse. Deeper isolation, interrogation methods, deprivation, physical or sexual assaults, torturing, depriving sleep or food, forced labor, humiliation of the self, or threats of harm and annihilation. The goal is to bring the victim into total submission under the controlling group in thought, word, and action. There are examples of this in some cult-like environments. But the idea of, quote, breaking the will, unquote, in children can also be found in Christian fundamentalist families. Endnote 7. See religionschildmaltreatment.com. Stage 4 in a high control group, indoctrination. Indoctrination itself. Once victims are recruited and their will has been broken, they are now ready for full-on indoctrination, a reprogramming of the mind where old or conflicting information is thrown away and replaced with a flood of thoughts, beliefs, ideas, or intentions of the controlling group. Some refer to this mind control. Some refer to this as mind control, because victims are no longer allowed to question nor to think for themselves. Their thoughts and actions reflect only the will of the controlling group. High control group's ideology. Victims may be forced to read and memorize dogma, sit through lectures and sermons, or have intense interrogations. The purpose of these is to correct, quote-unquote, correcting and replacing thoughts and ideas which oppose the group thought. Stage 5, commitment and submission. After victims are indoctrinated, the control group then seeks their allegiance through total submission of individuals. At this point, victims may be given a job to prove their devotion. This might be recruiting others, fighting physical or ideological wars, practicing religious rites, defending the group or its leaders, and in some cases even sacrificing their lives for the group or ideology. Stage 6, shunning. If at any time a victim begins to second-guess, to question, or to defy the group and its accompanying ideology, the high control group, defy the high control group and its accompanying ideology, it will be seen as treason. The individual or victim will be subject to the will-breaking and indoctrinating phases yet again. If victims reject the high control group and can make an escape, they will be subject to shunning. They will be cut off by all other members of the group. They will be shamed, guilted, and demonized to those within who stay behind. In other cases, the high control group will shame, guilt, harass, stalk, or even love bomb. This is an attempt to entice the victim with gifts and niceties to bring them back, instead of cutting them off. In this instance, a victim will have to choose to cut ties, or they will be subject to continued emotional onslaughts of abuse. Other extreme groups have forcibly held victims who wished to leave, or those who reject the will-breaking phase. They have even ended victims' lives at times for their non-compliance. If a victim escapes and can shed the group's control, the high control group will attempt to control others' perceptions of this victim through character assassination, spreading rumors, and saying lies. A discussion of common symptoms of abuse we might notice. Abuse takes a toll on its victim. Similar to an illness, abuse has many symptoms. Below are just a few typical responses our bodies and minds may experience alongside abusive behavior. If someone has experienced any type of abuse, which we have previously discussed, including any of the partial cycles or the systemic abuse, high control systems, they will likely experience several of the common symptoms which follow. Physical evidence includes bruising, scarring or scars, broken bones, frequent doctor and hospital visits, or the attempt to hide broken bones, gashes, and bruising. Fear and anxiety. Being afraid around a particular person, having a generalized fear of males, acting timid, easily startled and extra careful, not wanting to go back home, or avoiding a certain place. A general anxiety and increased nervousness. Depression may be part of the symptoms. Crying easily, feeling down or blue, blocking out the world, talking about DEATH or DYING, or attempts at self-deletion. Disinterest in a project or skill the victim once loved and found pleasure in. When a victim is not spending time with friends or family anymore, missing important appointments, or is not participating in previously enjoyed activities, or does not want to leave their house. This is a symptom that something is wrong. Disassociation. Disassociation is when a person is unable to remove themselves physically from a threatening situation. Mentally, they will often attempt to leave the situation by imagining distance and space, safety, blocking out the abuse that is happening in their mind, and thinking of other things. This is a coping mechanism. Post-traumatic stress disorder, sometimes called PTSD, is waking and sleeping avoidance of talking about troubling things, being easily startled, angry outbursts, or a feeling of nervousness, hypervigilance, difficulty with remembering exact details surrounding some parts of the abuse, deep depression, constant negativity, guilt feelings, and self-blaming. For young children, PTSD may be misdiagnosed as ADHD, inattentive, or it has been noticed to cause regression, such as bedwetting or language deterioration. At times, it may entail acting out the abuse that happened to them while playing, or a child becoming clingy or more distant and resistive of cuddling and physical affection. Making excuses. Explaining away suspicious behavior or injuries, covering for another's actions, attempting to justify things out loud for a victim's own benefit. Weight loss or weight gain. Losing or gaining weight quickly, showing signs of illnesses, or seeming to, quote, grow old in a short amount of time. Attempts at intervention. Frequent police visits to a home. A victim might always be moving from place to place and staying in hiding, or attempting to hide. A victim might be overly apologetic, always assuming that things are their fault, apologizing unnecessarily, and frequently self-blaming. Self-esteem issues are putting oneself down or trying to elevate oneself unusually, though not while in the presence of the abuser. A change in personality can be noted. A usually outgoing person who acts shy or timid around an abuser, or someone who was often articulate, begins to have trouble expressing thoughts and feelings. Addictions can develop. Turning toward alcohol or substance abuse numbs some of the pain. This list is not comprehensive. There are hundreds of ways a person and a body might respond to abusive situations. But this is a broad list of the top symptoms that help us to identify victims. And a victim themselves can begin to recognize how their bodies and minds might have begun reacting to the abusive trauma they have experienced. Can you identify with some of the examples? If you have, you are not alone. As you can see from the definitions given and the cycles listed, abuse has brought a lot of harm into your life. Every survivor needs a coach, and they need some help as they break free. The Courage Coach is here to walk with you through the tough questions and any difficulties you may encounter as you find safety and healing after abuse. Defining what has happened is a great start, but there is more healing to be found. Let's keep pressing onward together. The next chapter is Why Was I Abused? Thank you for taking time to listen to this.